Good morning and welcome to the StoreX live stream. My name, for if you don't know, is Martin White. StoreX is a small consultancy company and we specialise purely in ControlPoint. We don't provide any other solutions. We're very much focused on delivering ControlPoint solutions that actually work for our customers, and that may require some additional external integration, but again we have the capabilities of writing code to make that work for our customers. So for anybody who's not aware, ControlPoint is a software solution from MicroFocus, originally from Hewlett-Packard, but ControlPoint is a solution that enables you to index and really understand the makeup of your unstructured data. So what are typical user cases for ControlPoint? Anywhere from if you want to tidy your infrastructure. We all know that unstructured data, has been growing immensely over the years, and really identifying what data we've got, what data do we need to actually keep any longer, can be a massive task, especially when we're dealing with millions of documents. So ControlPoint is a solution that could help you, for example, to remove all that old duplicate information and really start to reclaim some of that storage space. And then potentially, obviously, a storage purchase, a physical storage purchase, could be cancelled. You may not need to do, or deferred because you're freeing up capacity. I suppose the other user case at the other end of the spectrum is something like a DSAR, a subject access request, where your organization has received a DSAR from an external subject matter, an external body, and you want to be able to locate all the documents that contain information that's relevant to that subject. And that could be an individual's name, it could be anything to do with the content of the documents that you want to be able to find. So ControlPoint allows you to discover the metadata, but also index the contents to make it searchable, so you can really classify your information. So that's really a very quick overview of ControlPoint. Today's stream is really meant to help existing ControlPoint customers, because although ControlPoint is a very efficient, very scalable solution, one of the potential areas of frustration, I suppose, for new customers and existing customers is monitoring the ingestion process, because it's consistent. The ingestion process consists of 3 stages. Stage 1 is a connector will perform the initial scan, and basically the connector builds a linked list of files or documents to be ingested. Stage 2, which is performed by the connector framework process, actually reads that linked list and extracts the metadata and builds the content indexes for those documents. And stage 3 is that there is a separate process for storing that metadata and those content indexes into one of 2 databases. So metadata gets written to a SQL database, and the content indexes get stored in a flat file database, which is unique to ControlPoint. So really understanding that kind of ingestion sequence and where a particular ingestion is in that process can be frustrating to find out, and awkward if you're not necessarily doing it or working with ControlPoint on a daily basis. So let me show you what the problem is, and then talk to you around what the potential solution is that we've developed. So let me switch to our development environment, and this is just within our lab. It's a ControlPoint environment which is running the latest version of ControlPoint, something like 5.9-2. Our solution is backwards compatible, so even if you're running a very old version of ControlPoint, the software will still work. Let me show you what the problem is, where the issue could exist. So this is ControlPoint's front end, and what it consists of, and I'll go back to the very beginning. So this is how a typical user would see ControlPoint. They may not see these options at the bottom or all these options, depending on their access rights. But we're really interested in repositories because this is the first stage of where you're ingesting your data. I'm going to go to the center tab where I have 4 ingestions that have already been performed. And these are 3 of these are just simple file shares. So we're performing some content indexes or documents that reside on these particular file shares. So the first 2 are file shares. The third one is a 365 mailboxes. So we're ingesting the contents or a number of mailboxes that reside in Azure. And finally, I've got a remote connector on a different platform, which is performing an ingestion from a slightly different area. And these are all scanned previously and have been analysed and are being used. Now, normally, we would perform incremental ingestions on these repositories just to keep them up to date. But I'm going to, because it's in our lab environment and the data is pretty static, I'm going to force them to do a full ingestion so you can see something in action, and I can actually describe where the area of frustration might creep in. So I'm going to ask these or instruct these to do a full rescan, and I'm just going to kick all of them off very quickly, just so we can get some data being generated. We'll do the mailboxes as well, and we'll just do the 4th one for completion. So the question is, now we've started those ingestions, how do we find out the status? So you have to interact with each of the components using a browser, and you receive an XML output. So for example, the first stage is we need to issue a command to the connector, and the connector is running on 7200 socket. But we have to say, well, what are you doing? What's happening? And these are the tasks which are been run or due to be run for the connectors. This is one connector. Remember, we have several connectors running different jobs. So we would need to do an inquiry on each. And although we get a response, we need really then to understand the information that's come back. The second stage, as I mentioned, is talking to the framework. So we need to talk to the framework to find out what the framework is doing and have all these jobs been processed. So again, it's being able to talk to these components and understanding that the status. Here you can see a number of finished jobs, but we might want to do an inquiry to find out how many jobs are actually in a processing state. Okay, so these are jobs which are actually running in the background. Now, we could have easily missed that by doing the first command. So you really have to know how to interact with each of the components. The third stage is we need to talk to the, if you like, the final components writing to the database. So again, I need to go in, I need to know the socket it's running on. And in this case, I happen to know it's on 4500. But again, we need to go and talk to this component to find out, well, if they're all finished, does that mean the ingestion's finished? And the answer is no. So you will find that it becomes very frustrating. We don't get any information back around the timescales of when the particular components are going to be finished, i.e. when will that data be available for us to categorize and search. Okay, so it can become very, very frustrating. So how do we address that? Well, we've designed a small application, which I'll run now for you, which is really designed to give a single pane of glass, a single view of the ingestion process. So at the very top, we've got the blue boxes. These blue boxes represent each of the connectors. So that the initial device or initial application that's scanning the documents and building that linked list of documents to be ingested. And here you can see at the very top, we've got a reference to the host where they reside on. So you can see there's a file system on our SQL box, and then there's another file connector on a different server. The ports they're associated with, what's running at the moment. So those jobs are pretty small that I started, and they also went through fairly quickly. And then what jobs are queued, and what jobs had finished. So you can see here that the last jobs on this particular framework finished this morning at 10:42. The number at the bottom, the scan interval, is how frequently that the software will go out and do an inquiry on the particular connector to find out the status. So once, as I mentioned previously, once the connector's done its initial scan, it's then passed to the connector framework to perform the extraction. So it performs the extraction of the metadata and builds those content indexes. You may recall when I interacted with the one of the frameworks, we saw a list of the processing jobs. And so they're obviously the jobs which are actually running. And what we're showing here in the sort of pinky boxes in the middle are all the frameworks. And you can tell that, for example, this particular framework here is residing on this server, this host. It's running on this network socket. We've estimated that the jobs will finish in 7 minutes 33 seconds. There are 24 tasks being processed at the moment, and there are 50 plus tasks queued waiting to run. Now we've designed a little queue length slider bar, so we can increase this slider bar to find out how many jobs are actually queued. And the reason for that is that one of the things, if you issue a command to a framework, it will attempt to load all the processing in queue jobs into memory. And that can actually use memory on the machine that's doing the actual work. So you want to control that, and hence why the queue length will only retrieve a maximum of whatever the number is. So in this case, 183. Well, there are actually only 93 queued. So there's 25 processing and 93 queued at the moment. As those jobs are finishing, then obviously they're changing state, and the number of jobs finished will be incremented, and so on. There's also a CPU usage counter. So at the very top, it tells us how much processing power that particular component is using. So here, this is for a file system. We've got another file system on a different server, and then our Exchange framework on this box is also performing an ingestion task. I mentioned the last component in this series is on the bottom. The green is the metastore. So that's the process that's writing the SQL or the metadata information to a SQL database. And here you can see that there are 2 tasks processing at the moment. So 2 tasks actually writing data to the SQL database. And it's estimated that they will be finished in 35 seconds. You can just see that's just incremented to 4. Now, you may have noticed that the scan interval on the metastore is set to 600 seconds, 10 minutes. And that's because we have 2 ways of collecting information. The first way is that we scan the components on a regular interval, so every 20 seconds or every 60 seconds. Or with the metastore, we've actually configured the ControlPoint component to inform us when a job is starting and when a job is finishing. So it'll automatically update us as jobs are started or initiated and as they are finishing successfully. The scan interval 600 is simply to provide you with a visual update that the component, the ControlPoint component, is still active. And lastly, the 2 orange boxes next to the metastore are the 2 processes that are writing the content indexes to the flat file systems. And here, very similar, you can see the estimated time of completion, the number of outstanding commits to the database, and the fragmentation within inside the database. So this provides you with a very single pane of glass where you can simply monitor the status of the ingestions. What we've also configured for many customers which have asked is the ability to look at the status of all the services. So for example, if I wanted to reset the Exchange connector, so you see it's green at the moment. If I was to click on that status, I can stop the service. And then if I go back to the monitoring screen, we should see that the Exchange connector has gone to an offline state. So that's stopped scanning now. And when we go back, I can change the status again. I can restart the service. And when that service restarts, we will go back and the monitoring will change from offline and start scanning as normal. So again, it provides you a very visual representation of all your ControlPoint components, so you know exactly what's going on. The other additional benefit for the look at all the ControlPoint services, and these are discovered automatically, is that we've defined a shutdown sequence and a startup sequence. This really ensures that the database is either shut down or started in a consistent manner. So, for example, you can't shut the database down if there's a pending commit to either the flat file database or to SQL. So really, it's controlling and making sure that your ControlPoint environment is always, the integrity is always maintained. One of the things I haven't shown you, and I'll go back to the monitoring screen, is that I mentioned, well, how do I know what files my particular framework is processing? So if I hover over the processing bar, we would get a list of all the files which have been processed. So these have been through the process and finished, and have now been stored, have now been moved on to the next process, either to the metastore. What's interesting, you may see at the very end, it's got ads. So that's because we're performing a full ingestion as opposed to an update, which might be that the file has already been ingested, but it's been changed since the last ingestion. So we're simply updating that metadata information. What we've also included, just to give you a complete picture, is that for each of the content engines, and normally most people have one, for demonstration purposes, we've got 2 content engines. We've also got the ability to look at the size of the flat file database files, where they reside, and how much free space is on the volume where they exist, i.e. is there sufficient space for these flat file databases to grow? So it's just a very quick indication that here you can see they just happen to be on our C drive, this is in our lab environment, and there's roughly 36 gigs of free space on the C volume for them to grow into, and then these are the sizes of the individual database files. So that gives you, as I mentioned, a very quick representation. Just to probably show you again, I'm going to change the scanning tool to a lower value. I'm going to go back into ControlPoint, and then I'm going to initiate another scan, just so you can see them appear. Let's say yes, and I'm going to do the exchange one again. Yes, and this time I'm just going to flip back. And what we should see after 15 seconds, and I'm going to change the interval on the exchange one as well, under the threads, we will see the name of the individual ingestion tasks running. So you can see FS1, mailbox 1, and it gives you an indication of the amount of time it would take before those, for that initial scanning, doing that linked list would be finished before it moves its files onto the framework. So very visual. We believe this is a single pane of glass just to help the person who's performing the ingestions understand what's going on. So that, as I mentioned before, is just one particular application that we've designed to make our ControlPoint customers, give them the availability to find the information very easily and get more value from ControlPoint. And this is just one example. We've designed multiple other applications really to enhance the functionality of ControlPoint so that customers get value immediately. We're happy to share the ControlPoint ingestion monitoring software with any customer that will feel that it will be useful for them. We very much want to help customers get the maximum benefit from ControlPoint. So if it's something that you would like to try within your environment, feel free to contact us at StoreX. I think our details are on the LinkedIn and the YouTube post, so feel free to drop us a post or an email, or you can contact us at info at StoreXltd.co.uk, and we'll be more than happy to share with you exactly how the software works. It's a very fast. I think the implementation takes less than 20 seconds. And then there's a small amount of configuration, which is all done from the application. Very simple, very easy, and ready to get you up and running almost within 15 minutes. Hope you found that useful. Other subjects that we're looking to do in the very near future is maybe do a subject on ingesting files which have been protected with Microsoft AIP labels. We can do things around DSAR and how to filter exchange messages. So, you know, if a number of messages have got a number of conversations in, how do we streamline those and just find the very top email to again make life easy for our customers. That's really it. So thank you for joining today. It's been a real pleasure, and feel free to drop us any comments about things that you might like to see in the future, or any feedback, or again, if you wish to try the ingestion monitoring software. Thanks for your time. Have a good day.